April 12, 1943, 5:17 hours. Eastern Front, outside Kharkov. The snow hasn't finished melting yet. It clings to the ground in grey, slushy veins, crushed under boots and tank treads. A low fog hangs just above the earth, thick enough to blur outlines, thin enough to let sound travel. Somewhere in that fog, a Soviet infantry platoon is moving forward, rifle held tight against padded coats, breath puffing white into the cold dawn. Then it happens. A sound rips through the air, not a crack, not a boom, but a tearing. Like canvas being ripped apart at impossible speed, a metallic scream that doesn't pause to breathe. But men freeze mid-step. Some drop instantly, others dive too late. Snow erupts in violent fountains, dirt and ice flung upward as if the ground itself is under attack. The sound doesn't come in bursts. It comes as a single, continuous raw mechanical, merciless, precise. You can almost feel it in your chest, not just noise, but pressure, fear given a voice. The German gunner never sees their faces clearly. He doesn't need to. He lies prone behind a low-rise, cheek pressed against cold steel, gloved hands steady, the weapon bucking gently, rhythmically, like a living thing. The feed belt slides into the receiver with a smooth, hungry motion. Spent casings eject in a shimmering arc, clattering onto frozen ground. This is no ordinary machine gun. This is the MG-42, and in this moment, before the smoke clears, before the screams fade, before history gives it a name, the modern battlefield has already changed forever. The Soviet survivors don't talk about tactics afterward, they talk about the sound. They call it Hitler's Buzzsaw. To understand how one machine gun, so cheap it could be stamped, riveted, and assembled for the equivalent of $100 became the template for nearly every general-purpose machine gun that followed. You have to start here, in the mud, in the cold, in the instant when infantry warfare stopped being about individual riflemen and started revolving around one dominant, terrifying idea: firepower first. Everything else follows. But the story of the MG-42 does begin in 1943. It begins years earlier, with a problem the German army could ignore, and a lesson they learned the hard way in the trenches of the First World War. Western Front, 1960. The Maxim gun has already proven its point. Water-cooled, heavy, devastating. It can lock down entire sectors of the battlefield, but it's a beast. Too heavy to move quickly, too slow to redeploy. Excellent for defense, awkward for offense. German stormtrooper units Stoßtruppen are learning something new. Wars aren't won by static guns alone. They are won by momentum, by speed, by weapons that can advance with infantry, not lag behind them. By 1918, the idea is clear, even if the technology isn't ready yet. The future belongs to a single machine gun that can do everything. A light machine gun, a sustained fire weapon, a defensive anchor, an offensive spear. One gun, one team, any role. Germany loses the war before it can perfect the idea. The Treaty of Versailles slams the door shut on weapons development. Factories are dismantled, blueprints hidden, engineers reassigned or dismissed. But ideas don't surrender, they wait. Berlin, early 1920s, 30s. The restrictions are loosening quietly at first, then openly. A new regime is pouring money into rearmament, and the German army now, the Wehrmacht, has a very specific request for its weapons designers. They don't want another Maxim. They don't even want another MG 0815. They want a universal machine gun, a Einheitsmaschinengewehr. It must fire the standard 7.2 15mm Mauser cartridge. It must be accurate enough for sustained fire, light enough to carry with an advancing squad, simple enough to train quickly, cheap enough to produce by the tens of thousands. And above all, it must never stop firing when it is needed most. This is not a wish list, it is a demand. The first serious answer comes in the form of the MG-34. On paper, it's revolutionary. Air-cooled, belt-fed, capable of both light and heavy rolls depending on configuration. Bipod or tripod, drum magazine or belt, precision machine to tight tolerances. In the hands of a skilled crew, It's devastating. In the hands of reality, it's fragile. The MG-34 is expensive, time-consuming to manufacture. Its finely machined parts don't love dirt, mud, or ice. On the Eastern Front, where winters freeze lubricants solid and dust infiltrates everything, the MG-34 demands care that frontline conditions simply can't provide. German commanders notice something unsettling. When the gun works, it dominates the battlefield. When it doesn't, men die. The concept is right, the execution is not. So the order goes out, we need something better. Faster, cheaper, and this time the engineers are given freedom. Grossfuss AG, Döbeln, Saxony. This isn't a famous arms factory. It doesn't have a long martial tradition. It makes metal stampings, industrial components, parts for other people's machines, which is exactly why it's chosen. Instead of expensive milling and precision machining, Grossfuss engineers think in terms of stamped steel, pressed components, welds instead of cuts, designs that embrace tolerance rather than fight it. At the center of the effort is a brutally simple philosophy. If it can be simplified, simplify it. If it can be stamped, stamp it. If it can survive abuse, let it be abused. The result looks almost crude compared to the elegant MG-34, but it works. By 1942, the prototype is ready. It had a roller-locked, recoil-operated, action-strong, reliable, forgiving, a quick-change barrel that can be swapped in seconds, even under fire, a cyclic rate so high it borders on obscene, 1,200 rounds per minute. When test gunners pull the trigger, the sound is immediate and shocking, not a staccato, not a chatter, a scream, a ripping howl that chews through ammunition belts with mechanical indifference. Engineers flinch, officers grin. This is not refinement. This is domination. The weapon is designated Maschinengewehr 42, MG-42, and it will cost a fraction of what the MG-34 costs to produce, roughly 250 Reichsmarks, cheap enough to lose, cheap enough to replace, cheap enough to flood the front. The first units to receive it are skeptical. It looks industrial, angular, utilitarian. The stamped receiver lacks the polished confidence of earlier designs. Some veterans call it ugly. They stop calling it ugly the first time they hear it fire in combat. The MG-42 doesn't just suppress the enemy. It overwhelms them psychologically. Allied troops quickly learn that the old training counting bursts, timing advances between pauses no longer works. The gun doesn't pause the way others do. Its rate of fire blurs individual shots into a continuous wall of sound. You can't rush it. You can't wait it out. You can only go to ground and hope it's pointed somewhere else. German infantry doctrine adapts instantly. The rifle squad no longer exists to support riflemen. It exists to support the machine gun. Every movement is planned around it. Every advance pivots on its position. Ammunition bearers become as important as marksmen. The MG-42 is the center of gravity, and when it moves forward on bipod, slung low, firing from the shoulder if needed it brings. With it a level of mobile firepower no other army can match in 1943, not yet. But weapons like this don't stay secrets for long. On the beaches of Normandy, in the hedgerows of France, in the ruins of Stalingrad, Allied soldiers begin encountering something unfamiliar. They don't know its designation. They don't know its manufacturing philosophy. They know the sound, and they know the fear. Captured reports start circulating. Intelligence officers interview survivors. Ordnance experts examine shattered positions and spent casings. A question begins to form quietly, urgently in Allied planning rooms. What is that gun? And how did they build it so cheaply? Because if Germany can do this, if they can field a weapon this effective, this versatile, at this cost, then the future infantry warfare may no longer belong to those who build the most refined machines, but to those who build the smartest ones. And somewhere on a battlefield half buried in mud and snow, an MG-42 will soon fall into enemy hands intact. What happens next will echo through every army on Earth for the next 80 years. June 10th, 1944, 6:42 hours. Normandy, near the village of Norium-Bessin. The hedgerow is alive, not moving alive. Leaves shudder as rounds snap through them. Dirt bursts upward in tight, angry puffs. Somewhere just beyond the green wall, an MG-42 is firing, its voice unmistakable. The Buzzsaw howl tears through the quiet French morning, flattening the advance of a Canadian infantry platoon pinned in a shallow ditch. Private William Fraser presses his helmet into the earth. He can feel each burst in his ribs. The gun isn't spraying blindly, it's walking the line, deliberate, methodical. Whoever's behind it knows exactly what he's doing. Then silence. Not the gradual fade of a gun running dry. A sudden, unnatural stop. A grenade goes off. Muffled. Close. The platoon commander doesn't hesitate. Move. Men surge forward, scrambling over the ditch, rifles up. They crash through the hedgerow and spill into a small trampled clearing. Smoke hangs low. There's blood on the grass. A German gunner lies slumped beside a low earthen position, helmet half gone, hands still near the receiver of his weapon. The MG-42 is there, intact, still warm. No one touches it at first. It feels wrong, like approaching a dead animal that was trying to kill you seconds ago. The barrel smokes faintly. The feed belt hangs slack, frozen mid-purpose. Fraser is the first to step closer. He crouches, staring at the thing that had owned them moments earlier. It doesn't look elegant. No polished wood, no flowing lines, just stamped steel, rivets, angles. But even silent, it radiates menace. The platoon commander swears softly. Get this back to battalion. Now, they don't know it yet, but this is one of the most important battlefield souvenirs of the war. Within days, the captured gun is in the hands of Allied ordnance specialists, then intelligence officers, then engineers. They strip it down on a long wooden table under canvas, carefully laying out each component, and something strange happens. Instead of complexity, they find simplicity. Instead of precision-machined elegance, they find intentional roughness, generous tolerances. Stampings where other guns would require milling. Welds that look almost crude but make sense. One British officer reportedly shakes his head and mutters, "Bloody hell. They've cheated, not cheated the rules, cheated tradition." London, Royal Small Arms Factory, Enfield. The MG-42 is reassembled, test-fired, disassembled again. Engineers time its barrel change. 6 seconds. Sometimes less. They test it with grit deliberately introduced into the action. It keeps firing. They measure the cyclic rate and blink at the numbers. 1,200 rounds per minute, somewhere between shock and admiration. The realization dawns, this isn't just a better machine gun. This is a different philosophy. Across the Atlantic, in the United States, similar scenes are playing out. An MG-42 arrives at Aberdeen Proving Ground, Maryland. American ordnance officers' men raised on the Browning lineage approach it with skepticism. The M1919 is reliable, accurate, proven, but it's also heavy, slower firing, and not something you casually sprint with across open ground. The MG-42, by contrast, seems built for movement. Tests begin. Tripod-mounted fire, bipod fire, shoulder fire, sustained fire until the barrel glows, then a quick swap, then more fire. The gun doesn't complain. One report notes that the psychological effect of its sound alone exceeds that of comparable weapons. That line is underlined twice. The most unsettling. Discovery isn't how well the MG-42 performs. It's how cheaply it performs. Production analysts break down the manufacturing process. Time per unit, man-hours, material cost, tooling. The numbers don't lie. Germany has found a way to mass-produce dominance. While Allied factories rely on heavy machining and skilled labor, the MG-42 can be turned out faster, with less training, by factories that never built weapons before the war. Like Grossfuss, like dozens of others now brought into the system, this isn't just a weapon, it's an industrial strategy. By late 1944, the Allies know two things with absolute certainty. They cannot ignore this design. They cannot unlearn what they've seen. The war still has months to run, but the post-war world is already being sketched in pencil on engineering tables. And one question keeps resurfacing. If we were starting from scratch, would we build ours this way? Meanwhile, the MG-42 keeps doing what it was built to do. In the Ardennes, American troops advancing through snow-covered forests hear the sound again, closer this time, echoing off trees magnified by the cold air. Veterans learn to identify its pitch instantly. Not machine gun fire, MG fire. In Italy, British units nickname it the zipper. In France, it becomes the sound of ambushes, of sudden chaos, of invisible death. But its greatest impact is no longer just tactical. It's conceptual. Every captured example reinforces the same conclusion. This gun has solved a problem no one else fully addressed. Until now. As the Third Reich collapses, something else collapses with it: the monopoly on German weapons knowledge. Factories are overrun. Engineers are captured or recruited. Blueprints are seized. Samples are shipped east and west. And somewhere, deep inside Allied weapons programs, a quiet decision is made. The MG42 will not die with Nazi Germany. It will be studied, adapted, and reborn. Because the next war, whatever it looks like, will demand exactly this kind of weapon. And the nations who ignore that lesson will pay for it in blood. The gun that once terrorized Allied soldiers is about to become their teacher, and in some cases, their blueprint. May 7th, 1945, 23:01 hours, Reims, France. The war in Europe is effectively over. In a modest schoolhouse, German officers sign documents that end 6 years of catastrophe. Outside, the guns are falling silent. For the first time in a generation, the sound of machine gun fire is no longer shaping the future, at least not in the immediate sense. But in laboratories, proving grounds, and design bureaus across the world, the future is already roaring back to life. And it sounds very familiar. At the Royal Small Arms Factory in Enfield, the MG42 sits on a workbench under bright lights. Its finish is scratched. Its markings are German. Its history is soaked in blood. And yet, no one in the room sees it as an enemy weapon anymore. They see it as a solution. British engineers are blunt in their internal memos. The Bren gun is accurate, reliable, and beloved, but it is magazine-fed, limited in sustained fire, and not truly general purpose. The Vickers, meanwhile, is magnificent and immobile. 2 guns, 2 roles. The MG42 does both. 1 gun, 1 doctrine. That idea refuses to let go. Across the Channel, in France, weapons designers are even less sentimental. Their industry has been shattered. Their arsenals are a patchwork of British, American, and captured German arms. Standardization isn't a luxury. It's survival. French engineers take the MG42 apart and rebuild it in their own image. The stamped receiver, the roller-locked action, the quick change barrel. They keep the bones. They start calling their experiments Type 50. In the United States, the process is slower but no less serious. The Browning legacy runs deep. John Moses Browning's designs have carried American forces through 2 world wars, questioning that lineage borders on heresy. But the numbers don't lie. The U.S. Army's Ordnance Department files note that the MG42 achieves a level of fire density per pound unmatched by existing American weapons. In plain language, it does more with less. And in a post-war world where armies will need to be smaller, faster, and deployable across continents, that matters a lot. The Soviet Union reaches the same conclusion, quietly, and with characteristic ruthlessness. Red Army engineers already have extensive battlefield experience against the MG42. They know its strengths. They know its weaknesses. They also know something else. Germany lost the war, but they didn't lose the argument. Captured German technicians are interrogated. Some cooperate willingly. Others have no choice. Blueprints change hands. Design notes are translated. Manufacturing techniques are dissected line by line. And somewhere in this process, a terrifying truth becomes obvious. The MG42 wasn't a fluke, it was inevitable. The world's major powers now face the same crossroads. They can continue building weapons rooted in pre-war assumptions, heavy, specialized, and expensive. Or they can embrace the lesson Germany learned in desperation. Modern war rewards adaptability. It rewards volume. It rewards weapons that don't just function in perfect conditions but thrive in chaos. The MG42 thrives in chaos. By 1946, prototypes inspired by it are appearing everywhere. Not copies, descendants. The core concept remains untouched, a general-purpose machine gun capable of serving as both squad-level fire support and sustained defensive weaponry, different calibers, different ergonomics, same DNA. Germany itself, even in defeat, will play a role. When West Germany begins rearming in the 1950s under NATO, the choice is almost comically obvious. They take the MG42, they modernize it, they rechamber it, and they rename it MG3. The same scream, a different uniform. But Germany won't be the only one to inherit the Buzzsaw. Italy adapts it into the MG42-59. Spain experiments with Setme variants. Yugoslavia produces the M53. Pakistan manufactures its own versions. Even nations that once faced it across the battlefield now build their doctrine around its principles. One gun, many flags. The most remarkable part. The MG42 doesn't just influence weapons, it reshapes how armies think. Infantry squads around the world begin to revolve around a single automatic weapon. Riflemen become supporters, protectors, ammunition carriers. The machine gun is no longer an accessory. It is the centerpiece. This is German doctrine, exported without translation. And then comes the moment when imitation becomes confirmation, when the world's largest military power decides officially that the German solution was the right one all along. The United States announces its intention to adopt a true general-purpose machine gun. Not a stopgap, not a compromise, a clean-sheet design inspired by a former enemy. And buried in its development files, one reference appears again and again: MG42. The gun that once ruled battlefields through fear has now conquered through ideas. And its most influential descendant is about to step onto the stage carrying the same lesson into the Cold War, into Vietnam, into the deserts and mountains of conflicts yet to be named. But adapting the Buzzsaw is one thing, perfecting it, that's another. October 14, 1957, Aberdeen Proving Ground, Maryland. The autumn air is crisp. Dry, perfect testing weather. A line of observers stands behind protective glass as a young American soldier settles in behind a new machine gun mounted on a tripod. It doesn't look German. It doesn't sound German. Not yet. The range officer raises a hand. Fire. The trigger is pulled. The weapon comes alive with a steady, controlled roar, not the wild scream of the MG42, but something disciplined, measured, modern. This is the T-52, and although its receiver bears American markings, its ancestry is unmistakable. The U.S. Army has learned its lesson the hard way. Korea exposed the limits of existing machine guns heavy, aging designs that struggled to keep pace with mobile infantry in brutal terrain. Mountain warfare demands lighter weapons, faster deployment, easier logistics. The MG42 answered those needs a decade earlier. Now America is catching up. The T-52 will evolve. It will be refined, adjusted, tested again. The rate of fire will be lowered not because engineers can't replicate the Buzzsaw, but because doctrine has shifted. Controlled fire means better accuracy, less wasted ammunition. But the essentials remain. Quick change barrel, belt-fed, air-cooled. One gun, many roles. In 1977, it is formally adopted as the M60, and the lineage becomes official. The M60 isn't a copy, but it's not an accident either. Its feed system draws inspiration from the MG42. Its general-purpose role is pure German doctrine. Even its nickname, the Pig, echoes the idea of a weapon that eats ammunition and delivers dominance in return. In the jungles of Vietnam, American infantry will come to depend on it the same way German squads once depended on the MG42. Different war. Same lesson. Across the Atlantic, NATO standardization accelerates the spread of the design. The 7.2mm Mauser cartridge is replaced with the new CERN 2622 K51mm NATO round. The MG42 adapts effortlessly. Stamped steel does care what flag it wears. The MG3 enters service with West Germany and becomes one of the most widely fielded machine guns in history. Its rate of fire remains blisteringly high. Its reliability legendary. German crews joke that it does T-jam. It pauses. In Italy, the MG42-59 becomes standard issue. In Yugoslavia, the M53 is produced in massive numbers. In Iran, Pakistan, and Turkey, local variants roll off production lines. Some are licensed. Some are not. No one complains. The Soviet Union takes a different approach but arrives at the same destination. Rather than copying the MG42 directly, Soviet designers absorbed the doctrine behind it. The result is the PK machine gun, introduced in the early 1960s. It lacks the roller locking system. It uses a different operating mechanism. But conceptually, it is the MG42's philosophical twin. General purpose. Belt-fed, mobile, reliable under hellish conditions. Once again, the Buzzsaw's shadow stretches across a rival superpower. By the late Cold War, the pattern is undeniable. Every serious military fields a general-purpose machine gun. Every one of those guns exists because the MG42 proved it was possible and practical to combine roles once thought incompatible. The template is complete, but there is a deeper reason the MG42, as influence endures, it isn't just what the gun does, it is how it was built. Stamped steel manufacturing becomes the gold standard for wartime production. Cost-effective, scalable, replaceable. Entire industries pivot around the idea that weapons don't need to be beautiful to be deadly. They need to work. The MG42 taught that lesson with brutal clarity. Even today, modern machine guns from the FN Mag to the HKMG5 carry its genetic markers. The same priorities, the same ruthless efficiency. The sound may be different. The idea is unchanged. And yet, for all its descendants, all its influence, the MG42 itself remains something singular. There is still nothing else that sounds quite like it. Veterans who heard it once never forget it. In interviews decades later, they can still mimic the pitch, the cadence, the fear. It wasn't just a weapon, it was a presence. Which raises a final, uncomfortable question. If a machine gun designed in desperation, under bombing raids and material shortages, could reshape global warfare for nearly a century, what does that say about how wars are really won? Not by elegance, not by tradition, but by understanding the battlefield as it truly is and building for that reality without mercy. The MG42 did that first, and the world has been following its lead ever since. Present day, a concrete firing range somewhere in Europe. The safety officer gives a nod. The modern gunner leans forward behind an MG3, its steel worn smooth by decades of service, its silhouette unchanged in all the ways that matter. The ammunition belt hangs heavy, the barrel locked in place. Fewer. The trigger is pulled. The sound erupts instant, unmistakable, faster than thought. A tearing scream that compresses time itself. For a brief moment, it is no longer the present day. It is 1943 again. Snow. Mud. Fear. The past hasn't gone anywhere. The MG3 was never meant to be immortal. It was built to win a war Germany could no longer afford to fight the old way. It was born from shortages, from urgency, from a willingness to abandon tradition in favor of function. And yet, it outlived the Reich that created it, outlived its enemies, outlived the very assumptions of the era that gave birth to it. Ask modern weapons designers about the MG42, and the respect is immediate, almost reverent, not because it was perfect, because it was honest. It acknowledged something uncomfortable, that infantry combat is chaotic, dirty, and unforgiving, and that the weapons meant to survive it must be the same. Every sharp edge, every stamped part, every brutal design choice points toward that truth. The MG42 changed how squads fight. It changed how armies organize. It changed how factories think about weapons production. And perhaps most importantly, it changed how fear itself sounds on the battlefield. Today, as machine guns are safer, more accurate, more ergonomic, they wear rails and optics and suppressors. They fire at controlled rates and integrate into digital battle networks, but strip all that away and the core idea remains untouched. One gun. One team, one dominant source of firepower. That idea was proven not by theory, but by the scream of stamped steel on the Eastern Front. There is a reason historians still return to this weapon. A reason soldiers still talk about it. A reason its descendants are still issued, still carried, still relied upon when everything else fails. The MG42 didn't just influence history, it standardized it. In the end, the true cost of the MG42 wasn't measured in Reichsmarks or dollars. It was measured in how many nations looked at the same battlefield problem and chose the same answer. And once that answer existed, there was no going back. The Buzzsaw is silent now, but its echo is everywhere.